Right, so as we come out of the festive season, it has sadly not been the case for many in the Middle East to be any cause for celebration, as Israel has continued to act every bit the pariah state in the region that so many people around the world now know it to be. But they've absolutely bitten off more than they can chew by turning their sights now on the Houthis in Yemen and escalating attacks on them. And this isn't even all about measuring such things in terms of destruction, because one strike there has possibly shown the world in the most stark terms yet how little Israel care about civilian casualties. But coming back to matters on a sheer military perspective, even one of Israel's own generals has spoken out about how stupid a move it is for Israel to strike Yemen, even going so far as to refer to his own country as weak and Yemen powerful. And the Houthis' response to Israeli escalation against them appears to be proving him right. Right, so the Christmas period has seen an extensive and increased number of attacks on Yemen and on Ansar Allah, the Houthis, by Israel, having now escalated themselves to becoming Israel's public enemy #1, it seems. It's probably fair to say that Yemen wasn't even a consideration when Israel decided to invade Gaza following the events of October 7th last year, the taking of hostages by Hamas being the trigger to what has become a never-ending genocide in Gaza and has grown to a wider war on even more fronts, with the annexation of the West Bank being mooted, Syria having fallen now to Al-Qaeda leftovers, a ceasefire Lebanon and Hezbollah are respecting but Israel is not, and of course a lot more besides that. But where Israel crow of their successes, it's easy to forget with everything else going on that rescuing the hostages in Gaza was the pretext Israel used for that invasion. So if they want to talk success for them can only ever be measured in terms of hostage rescue. And on that score, Israel's conduct has been one of complete and utter failure. But of course, the hostages were never what mattered, and we all know that by now all too well. But the focus over Christmas is very much turned on to the Houthis, especially following their successful strike near Tel Aviv with one of their hypersonic ballistic Palestine II missiles, so called in case there should be any doubt as to why Yemen are attacking Israel. It is all to do with solidarity with Palestine, with the people of Gaza. They see it as their religious and moral duty to do what they are doing, and as a result they cannot even contemplate stopping. It is anathema to them to stop before their objectives are achieved. It simply isn't in them to give up. Of course, the main story over the Christmas period has, of course, been the Israeli strike on the main airport in the Yemen capital, Sana'a, which came yesterday, Boxing Day here in the UK. But whilst this was going on, Ansar Allah's leader, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, hence the reason we call Ansar Allah Houthis, where he was speaking about the importance of the ballistic missiles they now possess that they are using against Israel, that struck a military target near Tel Aviv late last week, with another having been launched on Christmas Day, apparently on that occasion intercepted though. But al-Houthi said of these missiles, Yemen's supersonic missile operation, which penetrated the enemy systems, is a great and very important achievement, and the enemy and the Americans are aware of it. And yes, I think that's fair to say that they have. The Houthis have gone from fighting shipping in the Red Sea only with dinghies and drones to now having hypersonic missile capabilities, all in the space of 15-16 months. So having become better armed, they are now being taken as a more serious threat. And so the attack on the airport in Sana'a came. This was a mistake by Israel, though. It was a massive mistake. In fact, there isn't words big enough to describe how large a mistake this was. It can't even be called a miscalculation either, because there was no way Israel, as a UN member state, would not have been aware of a key UN member being present in Sana'a, but not only present, but preparing to ready themselves to take off when Israel's airstrike on the airport came. That was the timing. You see, having been on a trip to Yemen to assess health and humanitarian issues in the country was the literal head of the World Health Organization, the UN's chief health agency. There is no way Israel could not have known he was there. So the question that now needs answering is, did they care? Or were they hoping he'd be caught in the crossfire so Israel could blame the Houthis for his death? The US would have supported them in that, of course they would. When do they ever not support Israel? It would have been an attempt to either get Yemen censured somehow or drag the UN into dealing with the Houthis. But unfortunately, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus very much survived and gave a short statement. Our mission to negotiate the release of the United Nations staff detainees and to assess the health and humanitarian situation in Yemen concluded today. We continue to call for the detainees' immediate release. As we were about to board our flight from Sana'a about 3 hours ago, around 5 p.m. local time, the airport came under aerial bombardment. One of our plane's crew members were injured. At least 2 people were reported killed at the airport. The air traffic control tower, the departure lounge, just a few meters from where we were, and the runway were damaged. We will need to wait for the damage to the airport to be repaired before we can leave. My UN and WHO colleagues and I are safe. Our heartfelt condolences to the families whose loved ones lost their lives in the attack. Of all the possible targets in Yemen, why that airport then and there when they had to have known Dr. Tedros and his team from WHO were there? I think questions need asking about that. Israel has not been hitting military targets in Yemen, unlike the Houthis, who have been only targeting military sites. But to hit the main airport when Israel had to have known Dr. Tedros was there, they need to be held to account for that. They need to be questioned about that, because this is clearly an escalation in civilian targets. Are Israel now upping the stakes to make sure high-profile civilians are getting targeted as part of their blame culture against their supposed enemies? In part, they might need that edge, so to speak, if we can frame it in those terms, because militarily Netanyahu and co have been told they are idiots for trying to go to war with the Houthis. And this has come from one of their own military figures. The guy behind this statement is Reserve Brigadier General Aaron Ortal, a guy who has described his own nation as weak and the Houthis as strong, and has gone on record in Israeli paper Davar as saying Yemen cannot be defeated. And there are a number of reasons for this, and actually not all of them relate to the battlefield. On one hand, the Houthis are still actively fighting Israel. Lebanon is still respecting a ceasefire that Israel isn't. Hamas, although rebuilding, as I've spoken about in recent content, are still nothing like where they were. Syria is now Israel allied under the new regime of al-Qaeda cast-offs. Iran remains quiet, still not having retaliated for Israel's last strike yet. So other than Iraq, where Islamic resistance have coordinated efforts with the Houthis, this is the main front of aggression right now, Yemen. All of that means global support for the Houthis is at an all-time high, with Israel a complete pariah state now. So there is a war of optics at play here as well. Militarily, the Houthis are also still largely unknown, but combine that with their ability to innovate makes them doubly dangerous. This is a group that invented a whole new method of warfare, after all, to be able to create a naval blockade without actually having a navy of their own. They basically bankrupted Israel's southern port of Eilat, doing significant damage to Israel's economy, reliant on sea trade as they are. That then leads on to the expense of fighting the Houthis. Striking civilian targets is depraved, but it also does nothing to actually stop the Houthis themselves, who are estimated to be some 300,000 strong, scattered all over the place, and armed as they are by Iran, no problems for Iran in supplying them, close by with sea access. Israel, meanwhile, have no meaningful way of taking the Houthis out by air, unable to target them specifically in any meaningful way. A ground invasion of Yemen is the only way to beat them, according to Aaron Ortal. But as mountainous as the Sana region of Yemen is, to the point it makes the IDF struggles with Lebanon's topography look like the lowlands of Holland, you just can't see the IDF being up to such a task either, and there is no desire for them to do so anyway, Yemen being some way away from all of their other battlefronts. All in all, Israel just can't win here. Try convincing Benjamin Netanyahu of that, though. In response to the strike on Sana, he did an interview. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in an interview with Israeli Channel 14, speaking about Yemen, "We have just begun. We are not finished yet, and we will continue the attacks. We will paralyze them until they learn from what Hamas and Hezbollah learned. I said that Hamas learned, Hezbollah learned, Syria learned, and the Houthis will also learn. There are many concrete things. I am a person who prefers to do more and talk less. We are committed to removing this threat." Well, you are you? Well, the Houthis had a news flash for you, proving Aaron Ortal right somewhat and making you look like the genocidal Burke you are, as they have, of course, responded in kind to their airport being hit by hitting Israel's. Yemeni armed forces announced that in the early hours of this morning they successfully targeted Israel's Ben Gurion airport in Tel Aviv with another one of their Palestine II ballistic missiles, along with another nearby Israeli military site targeted with a drone. They also announced that they had successfully targeted a cargo ship called the Santa Ursula in the Arabian Sea, east of Socotra Island, with a number of drones due to it being headed for Israel, and the Houthis are still stopping shipping, determined to try that on. Now, what damage may have been done at Ben Gurion Airport is still not clear. There are conflicting accounts at time of writing. The airport closed for a short period, we know, and this was a civilian target, it has to be said. Israel claims the missile was intercepted. But even if it was, the message from the Houthis is not so much to Israel here, but those travelling to Israel instead. We can hit the airport in Tel Aviv at any time. Do you really want to go there? Do you really want to visit Israel? Is the message being sent by the Houthis this time? I would like to think this is another example of the Houthis thinking outside of the box, and in this case, given they've only targeted military sites previously, that the Houthis meant for this particular rocket to be shot down. A message to be sent to the rest of the world, rather than a desire to cause actual damage and loss of civilian life. But you can't be sure of that. And we still don't know details of any casualties at any rate at this time. I can't see how deliberately targeting civilian sites gives the Houthis moral high ground over Israel here, though. It's stooping to their level, in my view, but do let me know your thoughts on that. At any rate, just as every other nation who has tried it on with Yemen's Houthis previously, it's not likely to work out well for Israel any more than it did for them. And any escalation there by US and UK forces, which have also not made the blindest bit of difference previously in their avowed allegiance to the genocidal apartheid state, won't either. All in all, things don't appear to have been working out any better for Israel over and after the Christmas period than it was before, when they had multiple messes on their hands, all manner of things going wrong for Netanyahu in the lead up to Christmas, and don't you just love to see it? Get all the details of those stories in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch, because the media won't be picking them up. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so and don't want to miss future content. New vids drop daily and it all helps support the channel, which is very much appreciated. I will hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.